Do you struggle to write melodies? Would you like an easy way to spice up your tunes? This video will help you by using alien or chromatic notes. Melodies are basically just a series of notes. Usually these notes are played or sung whilst a chord is heard at the same time. This relationship between melody and harmony is an important one in songwriting. A basic chord is called a triad because it contains 3 notes. For example, the C major chord has the notes C, E and G. If we write a melody using only notes from the chord that plays at the same time, then it creates a very safe and harmonious sound. These notes are also known as inside notes. If you'd like to learn more about using chord notes in your melodies, then check out our video in the description below. Listen to this example that uses the C, E and G notes whilst the C major chord plays. Hear how safe it sounds. This is a perfectly acceptable melody, but what if we want something a bit more interesting? Well, we only used 3 notes of a possible 12, so let's use a few more. You may have heard of scales before. The major scale has 7 notes in it. For example, the C major scale has the notes C, D, E, F, G, A and B. You can see that the 3 chord notes we used in our melody are contained within the scale. The remaining 4 are known as outside notes because they are outside of the chord notes. Using these outside notes will add some interest and drama to your melody without sounding harsh or discordant. If you want to learn more about the role of these notes in melodies, then check out our 7 tips video in the description below. Listen to our next example that uses all 7 notes of the C major scale. Remember that our chord notes C, E and G are coloured red, yellow and blue. Hear the difference in sound these notes create over the C major chord compared to the outside notes. We've looked at inside notes and outside notes. Let's now turn to the remaining 5 notes, the alien or chromatic notes. These disruptive notes add colour and interest to a melody, but they come with more potential to dominate and even ruin your melody, so use some caution when working with them. As a starting point, they work best as short passing notes that don't fall on the beat. Notes that are played on the beat will naturally stand out more, and notes on the first beat in the bar will be even more prominent. This effect can of course be used to make your alien notes stand out, so feel free to experiment. Let's take our previous example in C major and mix in a few chromatic passing notes. You'll see that the chromatic notes are a mixture of the scale note colours either side of it. Listen out for how they change the sound of the melody against the underlying chord. Chromatic notes help to add a touch of unpredictability to a tune. This power can be particularly useful in a linear, static melody. These are melodies that move in a stepwise nature and don't span many notes. They look like a straight line on a page and are often the result of a reluctant or limited vocalist. By adding a chromatic note to this limited range, you can start to add a bit more interest without straying too far from the narrow melody. In our next example, we'll start with a linear melody in C major. In the second half, we'll add some chromatic notes to the limited range. Listen to how this makes a static melody become more adventurous. Another interesting use of chromatic notes in a melody is when the underlying chord progression has a borrowed chord in it. A borrowed chord is a chord that doesn't belong in the key of a song because it uses a note or notes from outside of the relevant scale. Basically, it introduces a chromatic note into the harmony. Because of this, they are often used with caution. One way you can make them sound more coherent is by using any of the chromatic notes they introduce in the melody at the same time. Let's look at a simple example to demonstrate this. In the first half of the progression we play the 1 chord C major. In the second half we use the borrowed chord B flat major. The flat 7 chord is a common borrowed chord in major key songs. Check out our video in the description to learn more about this. The B flat major chord has one alien note in it, B flat. So we'll make a very simple melodic phrase with B flat in it. We will repeat this over both chords. Listen to how it sounds different over the B flat major chord that contains this note. As the last example demonstrated, you have 3 sets of notes to consider when thinking about melody. The notes in the underlying chord, the notes in the chord scale, and the notes in the key scale. So if we are playing the B flat major chord in a song in the key of C major, as before, we need to think about the notes in the B flat major chord, the notes in the B flat major scale, and the notes in the C major scale. Look at where they differ and think about these points of difference and conflict. This is where the tension will be created, and think about where the sets of notes are the same to resolve this. Melody is the art of tension and release. Another situation that can create chromatic notes is when we transpose or shift a melodic phrase up or down. This is a common melody writing technique where you preserve the rhythmic structure of a phrase and simply shift it up or down. This idea of having something the same but different is an important one in songwriting. Let's explore this with an example. We'll start with a melody that uses the notes C, B and A. Then we will repeat this a whole step or tone lower using the notes B flat, A and G. In the first version we'll do this over the C major chord. In the second version we'll change the chord to the flat 7 chord again. This will accommodate our new note as previously. Listen to how changing the chord accommodates the chromatic note and combined with the repeated rhythm provides a nice continuity. Also note how we've put the chromatic notes in a more prominent position this time, but they don't sound so tense. You've learnt about chromatic notes, but now you need to use them in a well-crafted phrase. Watch the video on screen now to learn about the art of phrasing.